Grappling with turbulence. Story time with the Guardian of Chaos. With incredible size and magnetism, the Road Warriors were an extraordinary box office attraction. They quickly rose from a mid-level regional position in Georgia to world-class superstardom, and promoters were dying to add Hawk and Animal to their programs. Since both men were originally from Minnesota, it made sense for them to work for Verne Gagne, and the latter put the AWA World Tag Team belts around their waists. But as Georgia's circuit deteriorated, Gagne's circuit deteriorated, the Road Warriors looked for better opportunities. They got a taste of bigger paydays and joint promotions with Jim Crockett in 1985, and the experiences opened their eyes to life away from the AWA. Toward the end of September in 1985, they made 3 appearances with Crockett wrestlers in the Northwest, including Portland and Seattle, for promoter Don Owens. Remember, fans, welcome back to Guardian of Chaos, the YouTube channel for Chaos Corner. We are reading and reviewing this together for the very first time. I can't thank you enough for being here. Sit back and relax. On September 28th, they lost a controversial match in their AWA belts to the Freebirds at Comiskey Park in Chicago. But a review of the finish saw the straps return to the Warriors, much to the delight of the fans. But in St. Paul the next day, there was no post-match review. Jim Garvin and Steve Regal beat them with outside help from the Freebirds to capture the AWA Tag Team Championship. The title switch was inevitable. And for the Warriors, it was exactly what they wanted. The money to be made wrestling for Crockett and overseas for All Japan Pro Wrestling was life-changing for a time. Just being free agents was quite suitable. After the first year, in 1986, they increased their bookings for Crockett in the Carolinas, Atlanta, and Philadelphia, and did more TV to build up their stature in those promotions. And aside from a few trips back to Gagne's region to finish up their obligations there, that's how things remained. The Road Warriors won the first annual Crockett Cup on April 19th, 1986, and traveled to Minnesota to help Gagne the next day. The AWA was staging its biggest event of the year, Wrestle Rock, and needed the Warriors on that bill to sell tickets. Wrestle Rock was the AWA's version of WrestleMania, and Gagne was also laying out a small fortune to give it a major league feel. He rented the humongous Metrodome Stadium and tried to land Minneapolis native Prince to perform during the show, but Prince was filming under the cherry moon in France. So Gagne went with country singer Waylon Jennings, which seemed to contradict the Wrestle Rock theme, to be quite honest. The card featured 16 matches and 52 wrestlers. Wow! And the Wrestle Rock theme. It lasted more than 6 hours. Sounds like current AEW pay-per-views. An announcer declared it the greatest event in professional wrestling history. Now, Wrestle Rock was pretty incredible. Let's see, at the time, 1985. I don't know. I got to be in my early 20s at that point. Had already tried training at the Quest facility with Tony Altamore, Mario Mancini, and all the ilk, and however briefly, and failed at that attempt, my first attempt. But that's neither here nor there. You guys know that story. So that's where I was at that point. Wrestle Rock. Go out and view it on the network, on YouTube, wherever you guys consume the product. It was a great show, even with all those matches. A lot of unbelievable talent. And the media confirmed that neither WrestleMania had that many bouts in one location, hence claiming it the greatest event in pro wrestling history, and I definitely can't agree with that. Among the victors that night was Gagne himself over Sheikh Adnan Al-Kaisi, as well as the Road Warriors, Giant Baba, Mike Rotunda, Barry Windham, and Nick Bockwinkel, who beat AWA World Champion Stan Hansen, the bad man from Borger, by disqualification. An estimated 22,000 spectators were on hand, and the gate was a little over $250,000, that is. Enough for the AWA to break even. And again, you could put it in the inflation calculator, however they do it from 1985, and figure out what 250K gate is in today's money. It's probably well over $500,000, maybe $1 million, I'll have to say. I failed math in college twice. I had to take non-credit before I got to the third semester of math to get credit and pass it. I could count my money, but I wasn't good at math. I'm just giving it to you raw dog. One man, unique, unedited, unscripted, raw dog for you, the fans. Well, let's get back to where we were. All told, though, Wrestle Rock was somewhat of a fizzle, according to the Minneapolis City Business. A few months later, Gagne told the paper Whalen wasn't right for our crowd. Hello, McFly, is anybody home, Vern Gagne? Only about 2,000 stayed around for his show. And I made a mistake in not having lower prices at the Metrodome for the kids, to quote Vern Gagne. Gagne was facing innumerable challenges, say that 3 times fast, and his own front office was crumbling before his eyes. His partner in cohort for more than 25 years, one Wally Carbo, severed ties to the company in early 1986, as did Blackjack Lanza, who had a significant role in the transfer. Gagne lost 2 valuable assets. He also lost his TV and arena rights in Winnipeg to the WWF. And it was believed that the aforementioned Lanza did play a role in that transaction, that transfer, if you will. As it reportedly happened, Lanza convinced CKND TV station manager Don Brenton to drop the AWA telecast and replace it with WWF's Maple Leaf Wrestling. And since Brenton was also the AWA's local promoter, he simply shifted from Gagne's product to McMahon's at the Winnipeg Arena. Thus, the AWA was aced out, and the WWF moved in on March 17, 1986. The WWF snagged the AWA's TV time in Rockford as well, on WREX 13, and it cut Gagne off from another vital monthly stop. The AWA was further weakened when The AWA was further weakened when Dennis Hilgart, an affiliate promoter in Wisconsin and Illinois since the 1960s, jumped to the WWF and helped McMahon gain a better foothold in Milwaukee. In Chicago, after drawing only 1,800 fans for his April 27th program at the Rosemont Horizon, Gagne downgraded to the smaller UIC Pavilion. 2 months later, he lost his flagship station in Chicago, WCIU 26, and was forced way up the dial into a much less visible spot on WGBO 66. You see that mechanical AI bitch who I have heat with is interfering with the program, right? They're all watching, they're all listening, Big Brother, you know that. And everything that we do here. And that shows it right there. It's all connected. Somebody's watching, including me. I'm definitely watching. Stay mentally, emotionally, physically, and spiritually fit in these times. If he's for us, nobody else can be against us. I want you to remember that. That's what I believe, and I'm hoping you will too. Without that, what do you really have? We will all bow and we will all confess. I just want to throw that in there as we deal with technology and the storm that's coming. So I'm hoping I can provide a temporary distraction, a stress reliever, because that's what this is for me. So thank you, guys and gals. Believe me, from the bottom of my heart, I really appreciate each and every one of you that tune in. I'd be doing it regardless. It helps me, man. What do you want? Let's focus, chaos. Let's get back to the story at hand. We're talking about TV stations, WCIU, WGBO, WREX. So he was forced way up the dial, Gagne, losing his territory here. Gagne had some good young workers in 1986. Shawn Michaels, a standout from Texas, was teaming with Marty Jannetty as the Midnight Rockers. Second-generation grappler Kurt Hennig was one half of the tag team champions with Scott Hall. And rotund Leon White was in his sophomore year as a pro grappler. Obviously, fans, White would later gain fame as Big Van Vader. In contrast, the WWF cast-offs, Sergeant Slaughter and Superfly Jimmy Snuka were going through the motions, but carried name value and a certain amount of popularity. Nick Bockwinkel, at 51, class act, what a world champion, was everlastingly consistent and was still capable of going to the mat with anyone. More important to Gagne, Bockwinkel was trustworthy. And when it came time to move the AWA World title off of Stan Hansen, he got the call. On June 29, 1986 in Denver, the plan was set in motion. But Hansen refused to drop the belt. He left the venue in a huff and ended up taking the belt with him to Japan. Konnichiwa, bitches, arigato from the Chaos-san. With no other option, Gagne declared Bockwinkel champ by forfeit, and the latter began his fourth reign as the AWA king. Good times in the 80s, whether it was world class, the NWA, the World Wrestling Federation, the AWA, the territories from Georgia to the Carolinas to Mid-Atlantic to Florida to Canada to the Northeast to the West Coast to the Midwest, even Mexico, Japan. What a different time. Yeah, there were great eras, and people want to say the aggression era, the attitude era, the Monday Night Wars, ECW coming along. Even today's product in 2024 going into 2025, there was nothing in this business of pro wrestling, the sport of wrestling to me, than the 70s and the 80s. The 90s had their moments, but most of you out there that are in the demographic between 24 to 38 or 18 to 35, 40, whatever it is, you really don't know unless you do your due diligence. Research is your friend. Go back and look at the crowds, the venues, the atmosphere. You'll find nothing like that today. The sportsmanship, the ring psychology, the emotional investment, the storytelling, the magazine era. You see what's happening, right? Don't go anywhere. We're just getting started here. Alexa, play Tropical Thunderstorm sounds. And just to let you know what we're reading from, and we've been reviewing here on the Chaos Corner shows with Storytime. Storytelling, if you will. An unbelievable read. I'm reading it for the first time with you, the fans. So, when I get tongue-tied, and I know a lot of you out there like it when I get tongue-tied, that's why. An unbelievable read and an unbelievable book, nostalgia and history. The death of the territories, expansion, betrayal, and the war that changed pro wrestling forever. Thank you, Tim Hornbaker. Unbelievable, one of the best books I've ever read. And that's just the facts. And I'm glad that I can share it with you guys. Where were we? We were talking about Bockwinkel and Hansen, and Bockwinkel becoming the fourth champ, four-time AWA champ in Gagne's territory because Hansen wouldn't drop the belt and he was over in Japan. The disparity between the AWA's success in having a national cable television program on ESPN and its stunningly bad box office attendance was unreal. Gagne's shows drew from the low hundreds on one end to a 2,000 maximum, with the exception of a few special programs. You see the trend here, right? Despite the evident signs of collapse, Gagne was resilient and kept trying to rebound. He went back into the Bay Area by landing a facility in Oakland and began working with Angelo Savaldi, Northeast-based International Championship Wrestling, and ICW. And he kickstarted a merchandising campaign geared toward kids. Similar to the IJN series of the WWF action figures, Remco produced a line of AWA characters plus a wrestling ring to go along with it, so children everywhere could play out their favorite matches in their living rooms. Jim Crockett Promotions was also trying to get in on the act by releasing several branded action figures. Crockett told the reporter, and I quote, "The licensing deals that are signed are in the 5 to 6 figure range. But I won't give you exact figures because I don't want to cause problems between my wrestlers. Ric Flair and the Rock and Roll Express dolls will be out by Christmas." Merchandising was a logical step for Jim Crockett, now the second strongest promotion in America. Remember the time frame, circa 1985, 1986, here in the time machine on Chaos Corner. Added revenue streams were increasingly important, and Crockett was following the McMahon blueprint. Perhaps a mistake. We know the history, and if you don't, you're going to learn it now. He brought in top talent from other regions, expanded his TV network, and used cable to boost his promotions. But it's arguable that Crockett was ahead of McMahon in some ways. Think about it. His first Starrcade event in 1983 was Innovative Super Show, predating WrestleMania by 15 months. JCP was known for cultivating superior talent and carried the support of traditionalists over McMahon's product by far. Now remember, wrestling down in the South, the Deep South, Carolinas, as compared to the Northeast territory, the Northeast running in huge venues, all over the Northeast, huge buildings, as compared to the smaller, more intimate venues down south for Crockett Promotions in those territories. A different style of wrestling. A little more snug, if you will, a little more strong style. Two different philosophies, two different companies, different territories. When you go back and you look at it, the territories were amazing. I caught a small taste of it in the 90s, but the territories were amazing. And even today's independent business, 2024 going into 2025, especially now with the WWE ID program. I don't know if it's going to benefit, not going to benefit, but independent pro wrestling is like the territories today that it was back in the day. But back then you could stay in the territory and live there. Today you have to travel much more around. It's a lot different. You're doing it by plane, or you're staying just in one little small region. Back then, if you went into the UWF or World Class in some of those territories, you were constantly on the road. Hence the documentary 350 Days, so on and so forth. You guys can relate. I hope I'm making this relatable to you so you can understand what I'm talking about when it comes to the territories, how it is now, the major leagues, independent pro wrestling. I always compare it to pro baseball, professional baseball. You have independent ball. You have single A, double A, triple A, and the major leagues. That's how I break down pro wrestling, even today and back then. History's a mother, isn't it? Don't you love it? Because I know that I do. That's what this channel is really based on, is history. Facts, the truth. All right, I'm going to focus. Stand by. We're only 20 minutes in. No offense, man, what I say. Kayfabe. All right, we're talking about merchandising. We're talking about Jim Crockett, Verne Gagne, the WWF, AWA, Jim Crockett Promotions. Upping its number of live programs and outdrawing the WWF in places like Philadelphia, JCP, Jim Crockett, was on a roll. On February 7th, 1986, Crockett staged a primetime special on WTBS, Superstars on the Superstation, and featured 4 big matches as decided by a fan vote. In the main event, Flair went over on Ronnie Garvin, and the Jim Cornette-managed Midnight Express topped the Rock and Roll Express to capture the NWA World Tag Team belts. Crockett got in on the celebrity craze by bringing in country music legend Willie Nelson. Smoke him if you got him. And his efforts to go mainstream were well timed. But expansion was the name of the game. And seeing that Crockett had already had a presence in St. Louis, a complete takeover of that hallowed wrestling city was relatively easy. Things were about as low as promotions can go. Shareholder Harley Race was disconnected with the decline of the business in St. Louis. Let me make sure I have that right. Discontented. You might as well say disconnected. Of the business in St. Louis and the Central States, that he bowed out completely, taking a personal loss of more than $500,000. Vern Gagne didn't have the manpower to spare for St. Louis, and Bob Geigel was using a depleted crew in Kansas City. Neither could help the St. Louis cause, and the final co-sponsored SLWC Jim Crockett Promotions show took place on February 8th, 1986. Starting on March 2nd, it was all Crockett. Geigel retained a key role on WTBS telecasts because of his status as NWA president, and he continued to run the fragile Kansas City office, obviously, which was the home of the NWA at that time and for many years prior. House sizes in the Central States were stagnant, yet improved when Flair and other JCP wrestlers appeared. The Flair-Bruiser Brody feud was a short-term success, and Kansas City's Memorial Hall scored a second rare sellout of 2,800 on March 20th, 1986, as Brody and Race teamed to beat Ric Flair and Bob Brown in one of the promotion's last hurrahs. Across the border in Missouri, at the larger municipal auditorium, the WWF drew 6,000 on the same night. Crockett was committed to helping Geigel in this war against the WWF in Kansas City, and Geigel needed the assistance, but casual appearances by JCP stars weren't enough. On August 7th, 1986, Geigel pulled the resources from All Crockett and All Japan, but a headline bout between Flair and Dusty Rhodes drew only 1,000 people. What a crime. What a disgrace. Sign of the times. It was an anguished result and a taking into... Hold on. It was an anguished result and taking into consideration the UWF's recent debut in Kansas City, Geigel was ready to pull the plug. Wow. As I relive this and reread this, obviously, we're reading this together for the first time. He came into an arrangement with Crockett, handing over active promotional rights to the territory, and as a part of the deal, he kept a visible presence on TV and received a percentage of the local gates. As for Crockett, his idea of the once thriving Central States territory was to keep the regional feel by organizing a secondary circuit made up of lower to mid-card Jim Crockett promotion wrestlers and newcomers that were on the rise. And like he did with Geigel, he'd occasionally send his top stars to spike the box office. Booked by superstar Bill Dundee, the territory would highlight Sam Houston, Denny Brown, the Italian Stallion, Mark Fleming, and Buddy Landel, among others, beginning on September 26th. Stand by, don't go anywhere. The Central States were completely absorbed by Jim Crockett Promotions, and another old-time territory had succumbed to a national entity. In other parts of the country, Crockett invaded San Antonio, Albuquerque, Washington, D.C. against the WWF, and Jacksonville, Florida, a neglected CWF town. Washington and Jacksonville were a part of exhaustive Great American Bash Tour, which ran from July 1st to August 2nd in 1986, and included stops all over, if you guys know your history. Stops in Philadelphia, Memphis, Charlotte, Johnson City, Atlanta. Attendance ranged from 1,900 in Memphis to 23,000 in Charlotte. High ticket prices hurt fan enthusiasm, much like today. I mean, you've really bounced everybody out. Ticket prices today, you can't even compare it. I mean, put it in the inflation calculator. I mean, it's crazy. You got to literally jerk off the dog to feed the cat. And no offense what I say. I mean, I'm a kayfabe. Lighten up, man. It's a joke. It's a comparison. It's an analogy. Let me see. Talking about ticket prices. But with steep overhead, Jim Crockett Promotions wanted to ensure better box office returns. Many stadiums were less than half full. Reminds me of a current product today. AEW. What I say? I like all wrestling. I want them to succeed. I'm a fan, man. I'm a mark. That's right. I said it. A mark. How about that? Many stadiums were less than half full, and the revived country music gimmick fell flat once again. We feel country music fans and wrestling fans are about the same, said Sandy Scott, a JCP event coordinator. The AWA and UWF had believed the same thing, but it wasn't proving true. Hence, Delbert McClinton in Cincinnati. I believe that's who it was, or Waylon Jennings, or Charlie Rich, I'm Charlie Pride, I don't know. I'm as confused as a baby at Hooters. Nevertheless, Waylon Jennings, David Allan Coe, and George Jones, that's who I meant for Cincinnati, were three of the music performers at Bash programs around the country. The other major gimmick of the Bash was Ric Flair's successive string of NWA World title defenses, one for each night of the tour. Do any of the top stars with the multiple world heavyweight titles do that today? No, they don't. Big difference between defending your title once a month, once every couple of months, whatever it is, compared to back in the day in the territories when they're defending almost every night.
Someone was detected at your front camera.
Someone was detected at the front camera. I'm always watching. I told you that. You see the connection we have here on the Ponderosa, here at Chaos Corner. You got to be safe in this day and age, man. You guys know what I'm talking about, right? I hope you're safe as well. I'm praying for each and every one of you, and that's a shoe. Back to Ric Flair's successive string of NWA World titles and how it doesn't happen in this day and age when he did one each night of the tour for a month. Let that sink in. He wrestled both the Road Warriors, Animal and Hawk, Ricky Morton, Robert Gibson, Magnum TA, and Nikita Koloff. Shitoata! On the 13th stop in Greensboro on July 26th, he was defeated by the American Dream, Dusty Rhodes, in a cage bout and lost the championship. Flair regained the belt on August 9th in St. Louis. Rhodes, as a booker for Jim Crockett, was a consistently strong creative force in 1986, and his well of ideas was seemingly endless. Thank you, Dusty Rhodes, for when we had conversations. Not only in person, but when I was able to talk to you on the phone, at Turnbuckle, ECW. I'll never forget you, never forget talking to you, meeting you, and for you giving me the time to listen to me and even consider booking me for your promotion. Rest in peace, Big Dust. True stories. That's all you get here on this channel. That's why you're here, because of my connection, being in the business, an insider, a talent, and now being here for this show, in this community on the internet and social media, where it's saturated with all kinds of people, and you can consume your information at any one of 1,000 or 1,000,000 different places, but you chose to come here. I appreciate it. I can't say it enough, and I'll continue to say it. That year, 1986, remember the time frame, the famed Four Horsemen were born. Ric Flair, Arn and Ole Anderson, Tully Blanchard, and manager J.J. Dillon. They wreaked a lot of havoc on Rhodes, the Rock and Roll Express, the Road Warriors, and any other wrestler who got in their way. In May, Magnum TA's rivalry with Nikita Koloff took a unique turn when Magnum, the babyface, punched out NWA President Bob Geigel during a WTBS telecast. Geigel stripped Magnum of the U.S. title and announced a best-of-7 series for the belt to be played out in July and August. Koloff ended up winning the Classic Series, 4-3. Another interesting scenario showcased Ricky Morton weighing all of 200 pounds as a challenger to the 240-pound Ric Flair. It was Morton's speed against the dirtiest player in the game. Woo! And fans witnessed a number of good back-and-forth battles. It made it believable. Not like a lot of the stuff today. And again, I'm still a big fan here in 2024. Am I going too fast for you? I don't think so, right? You guys are up to speed. You know what's going on here. After an absence of more than a year, Jim Crockett Promotions yearned to return to Pittsburgh and wanted to rent the Civic Arena, the same venue the World Wrestling Federation used. But building officials remembered the egg the NWA laid at Three Rivers Stadium in May of 1985. They haven't been successful, obviously, so we wouldn't encourage them to come in here, explained Civic Arena marketing director Tom Rooney. I can't speak for them, but I'm guessing they probably think the convention center was the reason they were not successful and not the product. Hello? I would tend to disagree with that, because if we said we're going to do the Rolling Stones and we were going to do them on Mars, people would find a way to get there. In response, Sandy Scott told the reporter, "We're not worried about the past. We're very enthused about the future." Jim Crockett Promotions didn't let up, filing a lawsuit to get into the building. Finally, Crockett secured a date on October 14th, 1986, and drew a crowd of 10,000 to the arena. Between August and December of 1986, Crockett made incredible strides. On August 28th, he returned to the Los Angeles area for the first time in more than a year and drew a crowd 5 times bigger than his June 1985 effort. Shifting from the Olympic Auditorium to the Great Western Forum, a good-sized structure in Inglewood. Crockett's event drew 10,000 spectators, and Flair beat Rhodes by DQ in the main event. In an event bolder endeavor that sent shockwaves through the AWA, Jim Crockett Promotions went into Bloomington, Minnesota on September 19th at the Met Center and held a program in Vern Gagne's backyard. You sons of bitches. Crockett and Gagne had silenced their cooperative efforts just a short time before, ending years of up and down business. You see the politics and the backstabbing and what a scumbag business pro wrestling can really be. And what went on with the territories, and what Vince Jr. did, and what the World Wrestling Federation did, and the death of the territories, hence the book. Don't go anywhere. We're only half an hour in. Oh, a little dark roast. Not bad. But JCP entering Bloomington and also Green Bay, Wisconsin on September 18th was an aggressive move. And Crockett was now the one disregarding old territorial boundaries to press his expansion. On the whole, cooperation between promoters was at an all-time low. Pro Wrestling USA was a dead concept, and in many opinions was doomed from day one. 3 years ago, I thought promoters could get together and present a united front, Gagne told a reporter. Unfortunately, we've gone our separate ways. Demonstrating just how fractured things were over the last 9 months, Crockett had severed his agreements with Gagne, Bill Watts, Jerry Jarrett, and Jack Adkisson, a.k.a. Fritz von Erich, and had already gone into the territories of the three of them. Jim Crockett Promotions was still a member of the NWA, on good terms with Bob Geigel, Gary Juster, the Mushnicks, Shohei Giant Baba, Don Owen, Carlos Colon, Ron Fuller, and Hiro Matsuda, and Duke Kiyomoka. For the NWA to stay cohesive, affiliates had conformed to Crockett's newly instituted booking policies. But for how long? But how many more changes and demands would they agree to before the NWA was nothing but a liability? As it was, booking the World Heavyweight Champion had become a lot more difficult than in the past. And that in itself was a severe detriment, as we'll see. But it wasn't necessarily impossible to get help from Crockett in that regard. In 1986, Flair worked a few dates for Geigel, Owen, Fuller, Juster, the Mushnicks, and Matsuda and Kiyomuka. Plus went to Honolulu for Lia Maivia, Pehao, Melihini Kane, Pupule, Wiki Wiki, Aloha, and a Mahalo. For all my brothers over on the islands. And Puerto Rico for Carlos Colon. No me jodas, Marco, muévete, culo pendejo. What would I say? De nada, man. It's a joke. No offense. Yeah, so I speak 4 or 5 different languages. That's no surprise, is it? But Flair's priorities was always the Jim Crockett cities. In addition to Los Angeles and the Twin Cities, Crockett went into Kansas City, Wichita, and Omaha, and added a regular stop in Washington at the D.C. Armory. Wow. Debuts in Chicago on December 14th and San Francisco on December 30th came before the end of the year. And Jim Crockett was definitely primed for bigger business in 1987. Sadly, on October 14th in Charlotte, the blossoming career of 27-year-old Magnum TA ended when he suffered a broken neck in a car accident in Charlotte. The loss of a principal figure and popular idol was immeasurable, and Jim Crockett Promotions was weakened significantly. Magnum's in-ring rival with Nikita Koloff turned fan favorite following the accident and helped revitalize the promotion, often teaming with Dusty Rhodes and going to war with the Four Horsemen. Let me gain my faculties. As a result of all the positive reaction he was receiving, Koloff was pushed into the main event of Starrcade against Ric Flair on November 27, 1986. Their bout, which ended in a double disqualification in 19 minutes, was staged in Atlanta before 14,000 spectators. On the Greensboro end of the show, in front of 16,000 fans, Tully Blanchard went over Dusty Rhodes for the World TV Championship in a first blood match. Another memorable contest in Atlanta was waged between the Road Warriors and the Midnight Express in a special scaffold match. Unbelievable. The Road Warriors were victorious, and Express manager Jim Cornette, you know, Corny, you know our small but brief history, but it's still there. Somebody clip this and send it to Cornette. We worked together in CWA, NWA New England, the NAWA, Westchester County Civic Center. That's right, Cornette. And I still listen to you, man. I'm loyal. I don't agree with you on everything, but I'm still loyal. And you're perhaps the best podcast, since this isn't a podcast, perhaps the best in the whole world, Corny. And Brian Last. I like you, Brian. Somebody clip this and send it to him. I could be one of your biggest fans. Again, we don't always agree. But that scaffold match and listening to Cornette's road stories back then, whether it was Mid-South, World Class, from Louisiana to Oklahoma to Texas and every place in between, even into the Crockett territories and Memphis. Corny, you're one of a kind, you son of a bitch. You crazy freak. You are! Jim Cornette delivered the most incredible bump of the night when he fell from the 25-foot scaffold to the mat below. His death-defying drop was taken at a great personal risk, and he paid the price with a torn ACL in his right knee that required surgery. Starrcade, dubbed the Night of the Skywalkers, was a success, and with live audience and the closed-circuit television, the gate was nearly $1 million. Now remember, closed-circuit was long before WrestleMania, the original. 83, Starrcade, even back to the 70s with the pugilist, the boxing events. Just that simple. Bob Arum, Don King, whoever the fuck did it. Everyone thinks it was the WWF for WrestleMania. It wasn't. Crockett and the NWA were way ahead of that. I'm just saying, what, a good 17 months according to the statistics? I saw them both live. Again, I was in my early and middle 20s during this era, into my late 20s in the late 80s. Yeah, I know. I'm a little aged, but it's okay, man. Feeling good. Big Bubba Rogers, Dick Murdoch, Brad Armstrong, and Rick Rude were talent acquisitions for Jim Crockett Promotions. And in December 1986, Crockett picked up one of wrestling's top free agents, Barry Windham. Windham, it can be remembered, jumped from the Mid-Atlantic region to the WWF on notice in 1984. But he was a box office draw, and Booker Dusty Rhodes wanted him back. All things considered, it was a smart move. A growing segment of the audience had grown dissatisfied with Crockett's week-to-week productions and was tired of never-ending feuds and lackluster TV shows when he started filming TV tapings in the large arenas. Mistake by the Crockett's at that point. The arrival of Windham boosted interest in the immediate aftermath of Starrcade. But there was a guy in Florida with a little over a year's experience who was destined to make a national impact as well. That man was Lex Luger, and Rhodes was watching his progression very closely. Over in the UWF, owner Bill Watts was a busy man. He came out of retirement for 2 months of active competition in mid-1986. Partnering with fan favorites Jim Duggan and Ted DiBiase against the fabulous Freebirds. Bad Street, Atlanta, GA. Bad Street, nasty and hot. Bad Street, Atlanta, GA. The further down the street, or is it the further down the block, the worse it got. Bad Street, Atlanta, GA. Bad Street in the whole USA. Bad Street, nasty and hot. Too much? Too early? Too soon? Well, that's what you get here. Entertainment. Freebirds, one of the best tag teams, perhaps on my Mount Rushmore, along with the Midnight Express, Road Warriors. We'll get into that at another time. His syndication network was growing impressively, and dozens of stations were signing on in places such as Los Angeles, San Francisco, Minneapolis, and South Florida. But prime television spots were costly, and the UWF was racking up sizable weekly bills. He planned for a major live event at the Rosemont Horizon outside Chicago in October. But that show was abruptly canceled under strange circumstances. It was later alleged that the opposing promotion paid officials at the venue to call off the booking. If true, it illustrated the kind of open hostilities in the grappling world and fanned the warfare even more. Watts wanted a presence in the Dallas-Fort Worth area, and within a 2-day span in October, he debuted his syndicated show there and introduced Power Pro Wrestling TV. Tapings from Fort Worth's Cowtown Coliseum. On November 9th, at the UWF's wrestling taping in Tulsa, each of the company's 3 championships changed hands. The one-man gang won over Terry Gordy by forfeit to become the UWF World Champion. Allegedly, Gordy was injured in a car accident and unable to wrestle. I'll let you decide that. You, the fans. Due diligence and research is your friend. Leroy Brown and Bill Irwin won the tag straps from John Tatum and Jack Victory. And Savannah Jack captured the TV belt from Buddy Roberts. Buddy Jack Roberts of the Freebirds. Gifted English wrestler Chris Adams was a mainstay on the UWF circuit before going to jail for 90 days following a June 1986 assault. Just prior to showing up for Watts, Adams was actually a claimant to the heavyweight title in Dallas, but he walked on world class, persona non grata, leaving Fritz von Erich to create a fictitious title switch from Adams to Black Bart. Adams missed the big Thanksgiving program at the Superdome in New Orleans on November 27, 1986, a show that drew 13,000 fans. Champion one-man gang lost to Jim Duggan by disqualification, but won a 2-ring battle royal, while Steve Dr. Death Williams beat Michael Hayes in a cage. Former Blade Runner Sting was displaying much improvement, and his tag match with Eddie Gilbert went a long way to round his sharp edges as a performer. The duo feuded with the Fantastics and held the UWF tag team belts. Let's see what we got here, fans. Don't go anywhere. We're not done yet. We're 45 minutes in. You know that story time usually goes about an hour. Hour and 5 minutes, hour and 10 minutes. This is quality entertainment, at least for me. In keeping with the new norms of pro wrestling, Watts offered many of his top stars guaranteed money, contracts to save his promotion from future raids. Naturally, DiBiase, Williams, Gordy, and Duggan were signed. But in late 1986, when the promotion became cash-strapped, Watts found himself backed into a corner. The situation was compounded by a collapse of the oil industry, and in the South, people were losing their jobs left and right. Attendance for UWF shows dropped dramatically. To alleviate some of his cash problems, Watts released several of his top acts from their contracts, Duggan among them. Duggan was a leading attraction in the UWF and wasn't someone Watts' budding national organization could afford to lose. And you guys know my history with Hacksaw Jim Duggan. Ho! Check out the matches. They're here on the channel. Whether I was with Ricky Landell, Michael Sane, Hacksaw Jim Duggan, The Executioner. They're right here on the channel. Yeah, I didn't forget, Duggan. And I hope you're doing well, man. Inability was also hitting Jack Atkinson hard in Dallas. His son, Kerry Von Erich, was still recovering from his horrific ankle injury, and an optimistic newspaper report in August 1986 suggested he'd be back training inside of 3 months. World Class needed him as soon as possible, as weekly house shows were drawing meager crowds, sometimes less than 200 people. And looking for help, Atkinson landed George Scott, recently displaced from his job in the WWF, to book his promotion. Rumor had it that it was some type of working relationship with Vince McMahon Jr. But other than WWF regular Ricky Steamboat appearing on the October 12th Cotton Bowl bill, there was nothing to this speculation, rumor, innuendo. Atkinson picked up Bam Bam Bigelow, who went by Crusher Yurkoff. George Wells went by Master G, Tony Atlas, and Scott Casey. Bruiser Brody was a reliable face on World Class shows in 1986, and he engaged in a heavy feud with Gary Hart's charge, Abdullah the Butcher. On October 13th, at the Cotton Bowl, Brody beat Abdullah in a cage bout, although he lost a loser leaves town Texas rematch on Christmas night in Dallas, Texas. Obviously. The Von Erichs were always in the thick of things, with Kevin going over Black Bart for the local world title at the Cotton Bowl in October, and Kevin and Mike feuding with Brian Adias and Al Madril, Atkinson returned to the ring himself as his alter ego, Fritz von Erich, to topple Abdullah the Butcher in a special claw hold versus sleeper contest on November 27th. Kerry was visible on TV as well, and at one point he was double teamed by Adias and Madril. And according to the storyline, suffered a setback in his recovery because of the beating he took. Think about it. I hope your notebooks are out. So you're better off when you walk out of here than when you walked in. The truth was, Kerry was in no condition to wrestle anytime in late 1986 and early 1987. Plans for expansion outside of Texas were a pipe dream for World Class. Without Kerry and at least a few other recognizable stars, it was impossible. Behind the curtain, the promotion was in perpetual chaos. No pun intended. And George Scott was constantly butting heads with Gary Hart and David Manning, two of Atkinson's loyal assistants. Atkinson then involved an unknown amount of money to acquire the television contracts for San Antonio-based USA All-Star Wrestling, the last line to Joe Blanchard's old territory. USA was shutting down for good, and part of Atkinson's arrangements, including future TV tapings at Gilley's Club in Pasadena, Texas, near Houston. What a venue. Montreal was the textbook image of territory and turbulence. Following the deal made between Vince McMahon and International Wrestling, Dino Bravo, co-owner of the IW Group, had certain expectations. He anticipated an upper card berth on WWF programs north of the border, and he was sometimes given his proper due. But other times he was tossed into the middle of a card and essentially dismissed. Bravo thought he was getting the respect he deserved when he was booked to wrestle Hulk Hogan at the Forum on January 13th, 1986. For fans in Montreal, it was a dream match. But shortly before the card, WW officials rebooked the shows, pitting Hogan with Bob Orton and Bravo against Big John Studd. The deceptive marketing ploy was an immense disappointment to the 20,000 spectators in attendance and to Bravo himself. It's believed the change was because of Bravo's popularity in Montreal, whereas Hogan was the WWF's customary hero. And they didn't want him shown up, obviously. Bravo quit the promotion and restarted International Wrestling in Montreal without the rights to the Forum, since the WWF had an exclusive contract. From Vince McMahon's point of view, Bravo's move was inconsequential. His promotion was drawing astronomical crowds in Montreal. Without his participation, notably a house of 23,000 on August 18th. The WWF also brought aboard the Rougeau brothers, Jacques and Raymond, two well-known Montreal grapplers. In October 1986, IWA stars Bravo, Rick Martel, and Tom Zink jumped to the WWF for full-time gigs. You can't blame them. With Bravo as a heel managed by luscious Johnny Valiant of the famed Valiant Brothers, and Martel and Zink as popular tag team known as the Can-Am Connection. The local Montreal office continued, but it was no longer the center of any kind of territory. It, too, had become a bona fide indie. How about that? Looking at the Honolulu-based promotion of Leah Maivia, it was obvious she was trying to do a number of big things in 1986. Enhanced by weekend time slot on SCORE, the financial news network, Polynesian Pro Wrestling was seen across the United States, and Maivia was exceedingly determined to pursue expansion. She invested tremendous sums of money rounding up stateside talent and venues in California and then flew in her core wrestlers for shows in Los Angeles, San Luis Obispo, and San Jose. Do you know the way to San Jose? Da, 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 da. Do you know? What? I'm trying, man. I used to put out a heck of a karaoke back in the day, 'cause I'm a cowboy. On a steel horse I ride. I'm wanted, wanted, dead or alive. I walk these streets. No? That was a big time seller for me. Or little Sugar Hill Gang. Have you ever went over a friend's house to eat and the food just ain't no good? I mean, the macaroni soggy, the peas are moist, and the chicken tastes like wood. So you say, that's it, I gotta leave this place. I don't care what these people think. I'm just sitting here making myself nauseous with this ugly food that stinks. I give you a little bit of everything here. At least that's what I try to do. Let's get back to Hawaii. Aloha. I think I said that already. With Booker Lars Anderson, Maivia crafted an ambitious plan to promote further in Calgary, Juneau, Seattle, and the Midwest in March and April of 1986. The challenges for a stateside operation to expand in such fashion were hard enough without first having to fly more than 2,500 miles to reach the U.S. coast. But Maivia charged ahead, and her California shows drew in the low hundreds, with wrestlers such as Jerry the King Lawler, Kevin Sullivan, Tatsumi Fujinami, and Superfly Jimmy Snuka. The financial losses were adding up, and an April program in San Jose, do you know the way, only drew 25 paid spectators. That's right, I said 25 fans for that show with all that talent. It's the name of the game in pro wrestling, especially independent pro wrestling. I keep telling you fans this all the time. The backbone of this fucking industry. This is where you learn the craft, pay your dues, get your respect. It's pretty simple. Bueller? Bueller? Anyone? Her home crowds were not much better, and the office hoped to make up serious ground with its second annual Hot Summer Night at Aloha Stadium on August 9th, 1986. With 20 matches. Now remember, the original Hot Summer Night at Aloha Stadium was unbelievable. It drew thousands of people with unbelievable talent and stars. Hot Summer Night, the first one. Check it out. It's on YouTube somewhere. Hot Summer Night 2 was a huge disappointment, and you'll see as I read on here. With 20 matches, the event was an astonishing production, pulling together international wrestlers for yet another massive undertaking. Antonio Inoki, Bruiser Brody, the original Sheik, the Phenomena Kenji Muto were all on the bill. But the lack of interest and bad weather prevented the show from being a success. Only 1,900 people ventured to the stadium, more than 10,000 less than in 1985. Hot Summer Nights. And Polynesian Pro Wrestling was facing a real crisis. The $28,000 gate might have just covered rent on the venue. Put that in the inflation calculator. But very little else. And Maivia was left to pay the remainder of the expenses out of pocket. And if you don't have the money to pay the talent or to pay the venue or to run the show, no matter who you are, then don't run the fucking show. That's the point. Have the money before you run the show. Have the expenses all together and everything booked. That's how you run it in independent pro wrestling. I'm not going to talk about the WWE and AEW who have billions of dollars. You can't compare them. On the heels of this, the Honolulu office closed Polynesian Pro Wrestling and incorporated World Pacific Wrestling, a new entity with new ideas. Maivia and her partners Lars Anderson and Ati Soho moved their regular shows from the Blaisdell Arena to the Ilikai Hotel and put less emphasis on expansion. 2 years later, Maivia and the cohorts were accused of extorting money and threatening harm on rival promoter and endured a lengthy court process to clear their names. In November of 1989, they were acquitted of all charges. Like in Montreal, all traces of Hawaii as a wrestling territory vanished. But between small independents and the WWF, pro wrestling lived on. In fact, when the WWF debuted in Honolulu on July 10th, 1986, an enthusiastic crowd of 5,000 turned out. As the Honolulu Star Bulletin noted, the WWF were the folks who brought entertainment wrestling and a new era in Hawaiian grappling dawned. I can't thank you fans enough for being here for story time. We went a little over an hour grappling with turbulence. Come on back for more Chaos Corner from the bottom of my heart. Austin, Tribal Queen, are you here? Get ready for it. Fans, wait for it. Because I'll say that to say this. Because I tell it like it is. Don't you dare miss it.